So, Iman, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I'm just very glad and honored to be on your show, so thanks for having me.
Well, I'm going to tell the people who you are and what you do. How's your weather out there in Southern California today?
I haven't been out much, but it seemed pretty good when I stepped out. So,
all right.
Usually sunny.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent. We had rain, then sun, then rain today here in New York. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Iman because he's quite a young, amazing young man, extremely talented. Now, if I say your last name, it's Khabazian. Is that right, or how do you say it?
Khabazian.
Khabazian, and he is the CEO of an amazing company, and his company is called Hitsfu, Hitsfu, and he designs some amazing and talented things. He has designed some apps for Disney. He has his own product we're going to talk about. That's called Clairvoyance, and we're going to find out a lot more about Iman. So let's start out, Iman, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this business.
Sure. I've been making games since I was a little kid, 12 years old, messing around on a PC that weighed more than I did.
And you mean video games?
Just kind of always loved programming, always loved building games. Was doing it out in Orange County for a while. Got recruited to move up to Northern California and work with a startup called Playdom. At the time, as a dev lead, worked with them to put out a game, and we put out a game in 24 days. And then we got an acquisition by Disney for $563 million.
Oh my heavens!
And then I worked on another game that was a major revenue generator for them, and got a promotion to technical director, where I ran engineering for a studio over there. So just really into mobile, social, anything, games, any kind of consumer experience where we're really trying to delight our end users.
Well, that's an amazing skill because one thing that's popular, of course, right now is video games more than ever. And understanding them and being able to be part of them early on is just really quite a gift. And apparently, you when you did this work for Disney, this was pretty cutting edge, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It was very cutting edge. It was very new technology.
Oh, cutting edge? Yeah. I mean, there's the game part and the part everybody's exposed to, but then there's what's going on the back end, which is running a lot of testing different user experiences, measuring a lot of user behavior, and kind of analyzing what that means and how to make your game make more money and be more successful and make your users happier. So
interesting.
They're in a sophisticated operation like we had. There's a lot going on besides what you see on the screen.
Oh, I'll bet. Now, why did you tell me about Clairvoyance? This is your product. Why did you build Clairvoyance?
Sure. I had my experiences where we were working with big companies like Disney, and we had analysts, and we were studying user behavior, and we could come up with all of this great stuff about making our games better. Then I started to work with smaller app developers, consulting here and there, and I was, kind of shocked that they didn't have access to anything near that level. So what Clairvoyance is I'm using machine learning to essentially do the data analysis portion, whereas big companies have teams that do this. There's a certain metric that's very important to understand, which is lifetime value when it comes to consumer products, mobile games, mobile apps. And so what we do is we predict lifetime value, and we do that very accurately. And we find that when you predict that, you can maximize it, and you can figure out what ad campaigns have the best ROI with lifetime value for your lifetime value, and which features give you the most lifetime value. So that's what clairvoyance is. It's like a team of analysts, but in a box.
Amazing. What are your customers' biggest problems, and what do you deal with?
Most apps aren't successful, and a lot of apps are wonderful. They're differentiated. They represent the vision of a founder who really wants to make the world a better place, and they've put in all of this time, money, and energy and effort into making this beautiful app. But the app developers don't necessarily know how to improve their lifetime value. They don't even really know what their lifetime value is. And the magic recipe is when your lifetime value is bigger than your cost to install a user, that's when you have a profitable app, so one that you can really invest in. So just understanding their lifetime value, improving it, maximizing their return on investment on ad spend, and acquiring users, I would say are, those are the biggest pain points for our customers, app developers and mobile game developers.
Interesting. Well, a happy customer stays with you, so it's good that you've got a handle on that. And how does your product particularly solve those problems? What does it do? How does it function?
Sure. We have a few different features. Our bread and butter is the fact that we can predict lifetime value for build versions. So every time the app developer releases a new build version, you can see if that's helping or hurting their product. And for A/B tests, we can compare different test variants by lifetime value. And that's really something that we're the only ones on the market who do that. So other A/B test systems, they look at conversion rates to see if users get through the app, and usually that's weakly correlated with lifetime value. But what the app developer really wants is to maximize that lifetime value, and so we give them the tools to do that. And we also do that for ad campaigns, so they can figure out their ROI for ad campaigns.
Right.
But we also let them run A/B tests. We have a very robust way of basically they can data drive every detail of every feature, and then they can A/B test those details. So different users will have different experiences, and the app developer will figure out which experiences are working and which are really driving the bottom line.
Super. Well, that like you mentioned, ROI for our non-business listeners, that means return on investment, and that's a really important part of businesses. If you spend money, you need to make money back, and that's a big part. So that's really helpful to your clients. Now, how about where are you, say, in the world of game developers and app developers? How do they review your products? What do they think of your products?
So far we've had some great results. Well, we have a customer that's been able to make their lifetime value for their app greater than their cost per install, and so they're acquiring users profitably, and they're just really happy. So now our next step is to start to find other customers, and actually, as of last week, we released our product on a website so anybody can just sign up. And we're looking for a few beta customers to really, work out all of the details and work closely with to provide as much value as possible. So we're just, we've had one success case. Now we've released our, a software as a service product, which is the website where anybody can sign up. And we're just looking for a few beta customers to work closely with so we can really take this thing to the next level and create a lot of value for our customers. Well,
you have to road test it, and that's a great road test. Let me ask you, what do you think's next for Hitsfu? And obviously you're developing these, but what's the next big challenge you've got to face?
Well, I think the more you work with customers, the more you understand their problems, those all become the opportunities that you want to pursue. So for us, it's just this cycle of, get more customers, create more value, figure out what pain points they have, and the best ways to solve those. So I think as long as we're, attuned to our customers, then I think everything else will just kind of take care of itself, and we can worry about just creating as much value for them as possible.
Yeah, I certainly can agree with that, and I know that I've certainly seen a lot of apps and even downloaded some apps that just didn't work. I mean, they really just didn't work right, and it's too bad somebody spent a lot of money on something that doesn't work. So I'm glad you have that quality control. That's super. Okay, so let me ask you another question. How do you get direction? Who are your advisors? Who are the people you go to?
Yeah, I think it's very important to surround yourself with some, the best people you can, and constantly recheck your assumptions and brainstorm. We've been very fortunate. We have a couple of the best business advisors in the business. We have David Bradford, who gives us a lot of great mentorship and advice. He was a former CEO of 2 companies listed in Forbes 50 fastest growing tech companies, and he was the CEO and executive of the year in 2013 for Utah. And he's just a super guy. He really understands sales and relationships, and probably has one of the best networks in the world. We have another advisor who's just as amazing, Mahesh Ram, who's he's sold. He was CEO at Global English when they sold to Pearson for over $100 million, and now he's a CEO of Solvy, which is using advanced AI to help customer support, and they're just doing an amazing job at that. We also have my father, who's a PhD in mathematics and a math professor who I work with to make sure that our algorithms are performing as well as possible. So we're just blessed with some great people around us. We have unofficial advisors like my wife, who's always giving us some great advice as well. So, definitely blessed to have good people around us.
Oh, that really makes a difference. That's wonderful. Let me ask you this. You have a really good product here. I mean, people who are listening who are into apps or need apps are going to be very excited about some of the work you're doing. And, of course, anybody who has any questions on video games, you'd be a great person to go to. But, how do you protect yourself? What stops, say, Google or somebody from copying you now?
Well, just last month we received our first patent granted, and we have some other. We have one more patent application that's been pending for a few years now. So we expect that to come back granted. But I think that the way as a startup, you always have to ask yourself, what's going to stop the big boys from copying it, and it's got to be, your intellectual property. You have to be doing something, essentially better than other companies, and you have to be, I think, a good engineer, and you have to bridge together different disciplines and kind of have a unique perspective on things. So we do all of that. We take a layered approach to intellectual property, and we feel pretty good that no one's going to be able to predict lifetime value with the same accuracy that we are doing. Good.
Well, I think that's super, and being that's my field in working in intellectual property when I'm not here on the radio, I can honestly tell you that's a smart move. And
Sure.
having proprietary hardware and software and having patents that you've developed only increase both your brand, your company, and also your protection. So I'm glad you're following along with that, because you have some great stuff here that you've designed and built, and I think that's really wonderful. Let me ask you, what exactly does it take to build a video game, especially something that would be, more complex than I don't know, shoot down the missile or something. You know what I mean? Like a really top-notch game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's this space where a lot of companies try to compete, where they'll put millions in production value, and that's an interesting space. And then there's this other space where people just kind of find these fun experiences, and if you look at those apps and games, they're a lot easier to make. You know, they might not have the graphics, and you might not have 3D pipeline and a bunch of 3D artists or a bunch of content creators, but you might have just kind of stumbled upon something that's fun. And I think about the old Nintendo games, how fun they were. You know, sometimes those 2D games were as fun as these completely immersive 3D games that we have today. So I think there's a lot of ways to create a fun experience, but the first thing you need to do is you need to have something engaging, something people actually want to spend their time in. And then the second thing you need to do is, you know, make sure that you have all of the data analysis capabilities that you can grab a hold of, because that's actually the most important differentiator in the space today. There are companies who win with, you know, lots of production value. There's companies who win with less production value, but everybody is, you know, to really give yourself a shot, you have to have great data analysis capabilities. And that's something a lot of people, they just don't know or don't think about when they're developing their apps or mobile games.
Interesting point. Yeah, I'm still working on Pong. When I get Pong down, I'll graduate to something, maybe Ms. Pac-Man, but I'm dating myself. But no, all of what you're doing is very interesting, and you're a very creative young man. You've certainly built a great company that's very successful. Let me ask you, let's say someone's listening and they say, man, I need to talk to this guy. How can they get in touch with you? Do you have a website, an email?
Yeah, I'd love them to just send me an email at IMAN, that's my first name, Iman, at Hitsfu, HITSFU.com. So IMAN at HITSFU.com. And I would love to talk to anybody who's interested in what we're talking about. I'm, you know, really into learning about what other people are doing, what their pain points are, and helping brainstorm a solution. So anybody who wants to learn about this space, to someone who has an app who's, you know, top 10 grossing, I'm always happy to have a conversation. That's
great. And your website is what?
www.hitsfu.com. So www.hitsfu.com. And people can look at our product Clairvoyance at clairvoyance.hitsfu.com. So I'd love everybody to just take a look at it and send me some thoughts, you know, because we're very excited about this product.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I would like to encourage all my listeners to check this out. I've looked at the site, and I've been very impressed with this young man's work. I don't come from the technical side, but when you see someone who really understands it and knows it, it's pretty amazing, and it's certainly something you need on your side. And I'm so glad we had the opportunity to talk. Definitely email Iman if you have a question, IMAN at HITSFU.com, Iman at hitsfu.com. So that's great. You have any big summer plans? You going to be able to do anything fun, or are you just working?
Well, I think we're going to try to take some time off. You know, we have to take care of these kids, so we got to keep them busy. So we'll see how it goes. Jonny, I really appreciate your time. This was so nice of you and kind of you for giving us some time to talk to you, and it's always a pleasure to have time with you.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, too. We're broadcasting to 46 countries, so I want everybody to know this is someone you can talk to, and you should check them out. It's absolutely good. Well, thanks for being with us, and I appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too. Good night. fun.
All right. So coming up soon on the Jonny Mandolin Show, I have another entrepreneur and very talented person, a young woman, Ellie. And Ellie's going to tell you, I'm going to tell you all about Ellie. Ellie is a lawyer, and she's got a story to tell. So she's got a great study going on. We're going to hear from her after the half hour. And we're back here on the Jonny Mandolin Show. We're broadcasting live. Jade on the board doing our engineering. And I want to, without any further ado, bring to the microphone a wonderful young lady who is a talented attorney working on a very interesting study about dispute resolution. So to the mic, through the phone, comes Miss Ellie Villandre.
Hi, Jonny. It's Ellie. You can pronounce it Villandre or Villandre, depending on whether you want to say it in the authentic French accent or not.
I like it.
But anyways, thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. You know, I've heard about you from your mom, Angela, and then also looked at some of your work, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So, you know, tell our listeners about yourself and who you are and about your business.
Awesome, thanks. I am a corporate law attorney. I started out in litigation. I did litigation for a few years, so I represented plaintiffs and defendants in lawsuits, in civil matters and business matters. And I just got really frustrated with how wasteful litigation is. I realized that clients were paying attorneys, and really the attorneys were the only ones that were winning in the end, because the pie was shrinking and shrinking, and you know, the parties were frustrated, and it just took so long to get to a resolution. So I left litigation, and I started my own transactional practice, and I focus on business. I represent companies and people who want to start companies, and I do the corporate formation for them. I draft and negotiate contracts. I do some IP protection. I work on employment matters, and I have a special focus on dispute resolution outside of court. So when businesses have conflicts or disputes with other companies, or when shareholders have internal disputes, I step in and I try to help them resolve their disputes before it gets to litigation.
That's super, and that's a very important factor, especially in avoiding lawsuits.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think, you know, people think that if they have a problem, they need to file a lawsuit to resolve it, but that's really not the case. Even though it may be the norm, there really are better options out there, and parties, you know, they can negotiate for themselves, or they can hire an attorney to help them negotiate. You know, in the family law context, collaborative law is fairly common, and that's when the attorneys, you know, kind of cooperate with each other to get to a resolution outside of court, and it's just not common, unfortunately, in business or civil law, and I hope that will change. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely, because like you said, litigation is really a kind of a loss for all sides a lot of times, and it's really prolonged. People don't realize how long a lawsuit can take, and you know what is all involved in it for the parties. Now, we talked a little bit about this, but what makes your practice so special? What do you think you're adding in that's different than anyone else?
One thing is that I do have that litigation background, so I have a transactional practice with litigation experience, and most transactional attorneys haven't been in the courtroom before, and I have, and I can tell my clients, look, this is what I've seen, this is what my experience tells me, and that makes me valuable as a counselor or advisor to these companies. And just also that I have created a special niche in dispute resolution outside of court. I'm also a mediator, but often you will see me representing a party and negotiating a resolution to their case using mediation skills, but doing it as an advocate. And it is pretty rare to see attorneys only focus on that dispute resolution outside of court without taking it to the next level, which is litigation.
Well, let's talk about that. Why don't disputes settle, fairly easily, even though like it makes the most economical sense to just settle?
There's a few reasons. One is emotions are high, and it can be really difficult when you are, invested and you're dealing with someone who's close to you, a business partner, someone that you've had a long history with. It can be difficult to set those emotions aside and just try to, come up with a logical solution. Also, we are just programmed to see things from our own perspective. It's really difficult to see the big picture and to see it objectively. And both parties now are doing that. So, one party is seeing everything from their own perspective, the other party just the same, and they are not at all seeing things the same way. Another big hurdle is a conflict by attorney. So if your attorney is a litigator, they're getting paid as long as the conflict persists in general, and so they're not really incentivized for a quick resolution, and you have that on both sides. And then there's, in really large organizations and corporations, there can be several layers of people, like lawyers or business people, that you have to go through before you can get to the back table of decision makers, and that can really delay the process of resolution. And then, of course, there's incomplete data. So, one party has a set of facts that they are going off of. Another party has a different set of facts, and that's why they're coming up to conclusions. So you have all these things in play, but then if you have a skilled negotiator and someone who really wants to see the case get resolved, hopefully on both sides, then they'll be able to facilitate that exchange of information, etc., to get to a resolution.
Interesting, and yes, emotions do run high in that kind of litigation sometimes. Now, you've been around the block and you've seen this happen. So, what's your advice for people or businesses that maybe are considering, or they have a dispute and they're considering litigation? What advice do you usually present to people?
Well, I have to tell them to be logical and not be emotional. First, I always, I validate their emotions, and I think that's really important because we can't be robots as attorneys. Our clients certainly aren't, and we have to be sensitive to those emotions because if we're not, then they just aren't going to trust us. But I do tell my clients to be logical. I figure out, I ask my client what data they're relying on, and we also ask the other side what data they're relying on. So if there is different information or incomplete data, we're sure to bridge that. So I would say to people, ask the other side, what information are you relying on to come up with your proposal? And you certainly need to back up your own proposals with objective criteria. You need to have good arguments and statistics and facts and whatever kind of objective criteria you can to support your reasonable proposal is going to be important. I would also tell people out there to be cognizant of the costs of litigation. There's a lot of costs that are hidden costs that people just don't take into account, like the fact that it's going to take 2 years to get to a resolution. You may not get the resolution that you want. You're going to lose your relationship in the process. It's going to be very aggravating. You'll have many sleepless nights. So they really need to be prepared for all the costs, attorney's fees and costs. And I would just tell people, litigation is a last resort, but you still need to preserve your rights in case you can't get your dispute resolved. So make sure you're not missing any statute of limitations, deadlines, and also realize that, whatever information you do exchange with the other side could be used against you later. So, I would advise to consult an attorney as soon as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's many hidden costs, the iceberg of litigation in the time and all of the costs. Just your Xerox bill alone is going to be pretty high.
Absolutely.
And this in the discovery process where, you show me yours and I'll show you mine, That's
and then I also think that, people who haven't gone through litigation are not aware of the process, and that attorneys can write motions and parties can deliberately make it more expensive for the other side.
Absolutely.
By filing motions. And, unfortunately, that's why parties that have more money to spend usually are at an advantage right off the bat.
Absolutely. Well, now, you've talked about the litigation part of it, but you also deal with business. So what advice would you give someone who says, I think I want to start a business?
Yeah, you know what? I love working with entrepreneurs, and I would say, number one thing is make sure you're choosing the right entity. So as you're well aware, there are several different entity types they can choose from: S corporation, C corporation, LLC, partnership, sole proprietorship, etc. So make sure that they have the right structure in place. Make sure that they have the right agreements between the partners, if there are going to be any partners. If they're planning on doing a big fundraising round from outside investors, make sure to consult a securities lawyer. And, I'm sure as you would agree, make sure you're protecting your IP through confidentiality agreements, trademark applications, patent applications, protection of trade secrets, comply with employment laws such as through contracts, or make sure you're not misclassifying an employee as an independent contractor. Make sure you're complying with minimum wage laws and posting requirements, and have the necessary contracts with outside vendors in written form rather than just relying on verbal agreements.
Oh boy, yeah, that's so true.
And then also, just that marketing piece is also so important, to make sure that you're really strategic and thoughtful about how you're using your resources, and make sure that where you're putting your money, you're going to see a good return.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that ties into something else I was going to ask you about, because once again, you're advising people on a business situation. So let's say you have someone who has like a full-time job, and then they want to start their own business. What kind of advice do you give them when you consult with them?
Yeah. Well, I that's a good question. I heard on the radio once that people who start their business while they're still employed actually end up being more successful than people who just quit their job outright. And I don't know I don't know why. Maybe it's because they're just more organized or prudent or risk-averse or whatever. But if you still have a job, I would say, number one, make sure you're not violating any agreement that you have with your employer, like a non-compete, or otherwise any fiduciary duty that you have to your employer. But if you are starting, if you're sure you're not violating anything like that, and you're starting a totally unrelated business, then I would say, it's a good idea to work on it only during off hours, not using any company resources, because your company may end up owning part of your business.
Exactly.
If you do. But also, your website is something you want to think of early on, because it does take a long time for Google to start indexing the website. But before you buy a URL, you want to make sure that you can protect your company name. So you're going to think of a company name. Don't just go out and buy the URL. First, make sure someone doesn't already own the trademark for that. And you can start by doing a Google search, and if it looks like no one owns it, then go talk to an attorney and have them, go do a trademark search and do a thorough search, because, as you know, even if a trademark isn't registered, someone can still have common law rights to it. So
right.
Trademark law can get complicated.
Oh, boy. That's for sure.
And then also just make sure you have plenty of savings, because businesses are expensive to start.
That's for sure. Well, let me tell you, having started several, including City World Radio, it certainly is. All right, so now how about young people listening? What kind of advice would you give to young graduates about law school?
I would give the same advice to any young graduate who's thinking about, going into any field or going into any graduate program, I would say, is be very informed. Get as informed as possible about the area you're contemplating before you go in. So if it's law, get an internship. If you are thinking that you're willing to spend the next 3 years and $200,000 on a law education, you should be willing to spend a few weeks interning at a law firm if you could have that opportunity, because you may find that you don't like it, or some other area is better for you.
Absolutely. That's where a real good test of your abilities are, and also to see if you like it, because you don't want to spend 3 years in law school and find out you don't like it anymore, and that's an expensive find.
Oh, so, absolutely.
Yeah, not a good idea. Well, tell us, how can our listeners find you, your website, your email?
Yeah, my website is www.v as in Victor, ILENDRERLAW.com. You can send an email to the firm at office@vilandrelaw.com. That's the same spelling. You are, welcome to like my Facebook page. You can sign up for my newsletter on my website, and I send out some business tips from time to time. And I also have a LinkedIn page with about 20 or so business law topics that I've written on.
Yeah,
that you're welcome to check out.
I've seen it. It's really good. So listeners, I want to remind you, these professionals are really important stops on your way to looking at settling disputes or starting businesses. Take advantage of this talent. Ellie's a top-rated attorney. She's been rated in Martindale Hubble, which is a book that rates the best lawyers. She's won an award, several awards, and she was voted one of the best up-and-coming attorneys. She practices in Southern California and also, I believe, in Minneapolis. Is that right, Minnesota?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. I practice in California and in Minnesota.
Very good. And also, I'm sure that your website is accessible anywhere, and you can find some good information on there. So that's something that you want to do. And I understand you do a lot of guest speaking yourself.
I do. I'm really interested in entrepreneurship, and so I speak on entrepreneurship as well. And dispute resolution is one of my favorite topics. I'm doing a national study right now on dispute resolution, in which I'm circulating this survey to attorneys across the states and collecting some anonymous data, and I'm hoping to publish it with some insights that are going to help disputants and litigants make more informed decisions about litigation and settlement.
Well, that's brilliant. That's really something. Well, I'm thrilled to be able to have you on my show. I'm a musician, and I have a lot of musicians on, but I'm also a lawyer, but I don't have that many lawyers on, so it's really good to have you here. Occasionally we get a lawyer or two on. But it's great to have your wealth of knowledge, and your operation is great here. Your work is good, and your good luck with your dispute resolution study. That sounds exciting.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
Yeah.
It has been such a pleasure being on your show. I love your show. I love your music. I am a huge fan of you.